My name is Christopher Stout, and I am an associate professor of political science here at Oregon State. Oh, a huge impact. People who vote get the issues and policies that they're most interested in, right? And so I think a pretty good example of this is young people versus older people. There's a lot of research that shows that politicians focus on the issues that older people want because older people vote. If young people vote, then you start to see a shift in this. And we can start to see this happen just a little bit. In 2016 and 2020 with Bernie Sanders campaigns, there were a lot of young people coming out and voting in support of Bernie Sanders. The Democratic Party saw this and say, look, young people can be mobilized. Young people may vote. And so let's start talking about their issues. And I think in the general election, both 2016 and certainly in 2020, the Democratic Party's adopted much of the platform that Bernie Sanders talked about around college loans, around minimum wage, which disproportionately affects young people, and numerous other issues that young people will care about, like the environment and racial and gender equity. That's right. Historically, that's been the case, that older people are just more likely to vote for 1,000 reasons. But because they vote, politicians think politicians' main goal generally is to win elections. And you win elections by talking about the issues that voters care about, not just what the population care about, what voters care about. And if young people aren't voting, there's not the same incentive to pay attention to their issues. And I think what we saw in 2012, we saw this again, I think now in 2020, is a movement to pay more attention to young people because they're such an important electorate they can swing elections. I think a lot of people think their vote doesn't matter for numerous reasons, right? We're a large population, right? And so your vote is just one of over 100 million cast in any particular election. And so you might feel pretty small in that case. But I think that's the wrong way to look at it. You're one in a group of people of the same political party, of the same interest groups, of a group of individuals that care about the same issues. And maybe you're just one vote, but you in combination with a lot of other people with the same interest sways elections. And so I think people think, oh, my vote doesn't matter because I'm just one person. But in reality, if you think to yourself, I'm part of a larger team that can influence elections, then that matters a lot. Maybe even more important, I think, going back to your previous question about your vote not mattering, literally one vote can change the course of state elections, can change the course of local elections, city council, your mayor, and those are the things that have more of a direct effect on you than the federal government, right? And so there's a lot of, because the federal government the candidates who run for federal offices raise so much money, those are the people that we're seeing a lot of, right? We're seeing their advertisements, we're hearing their names a lot in the media, but a lot of the decisions that matter most to us are happening at the local level, and at the decisions that are made about opening schools, for example, is made here in Corvallis, right? The Corvallis school board makes those decisions. And so this isn't a decision that Donald Trump or Joe Biden would make if he was president. These are decisions that our local elected officials make. And I think people overlook that. And again, those elections are won by hundreds of votes. And so your vote matters probably most in swinging those elections. And those elections matter more to your day-to-day life. Yeah, that was problematic. I think there was a narrative out there that both parties are the same, right? And we saw a similar narrative happening in the year 2000, where you had much lower levels of turnout than you would in most traditional general elections. And so people, I think, bought into that idea that both political parties are the same. But whether you're a Republican or you're a Democrat, those parties are drastically different. They're not the same. The candidates aren't the same people. They're not going to support the same policies. They don't care about the same issues. They're not going to nominate the same types of judges. They're drastically different. But I think people think, all parties are the same because we're not seeing drastic changes as we go from one election to the next. But even if we're not seeing drastic changes, the policies that those parties put forth and the policies that are implemented are just much different. And so I think people have to get out of that mindset that the parties are exactly the same. I think you're right. I think people are disappointed for good reason, right? Like, inequality has grown over the last 30 years. People don't trust elected officials, and I think both sides push the narrative that the other side is evil, right? And so it's easy to get somewhat demoralized that it's a lose-lose situation. And I think sometimes people are unrealistic about what can be done in government, right? Government is built for slow change, and it's kind of both the beauty and the flaw of our Constitution is that there is opportunities for change, and things do change, right? The ACA, the Affordable Care Act, was a drastic change in how we deliver healthcare and who gets healthcare. The Help America, I forget what the Trump tax cuts were called, but that's a drastic change, right, in terms of corporate taxes. And so both of those things are pretty large changes, but they're not, one policy by itself isn't going to solve everything. And so I think people want one policy or a solution to fix everything, but that's just not the way the government works. There's piecemeal, and these piecemeal changes can be pretty dramatic, but not everything is going to get solved. Yeah, so I think I would probably agree that even when we're seeing this early voting, right? People are voting at numbers that you didn't even see in 2012, which was a high election turnout. And so I expect that will continue. I think people are extra motivated this year, and young people, so people who don't traditionally vote seem extra motivated this year. Young people, racial and ethnic minorities. And so I think that's in part driving the record turnout. The other thing is, I think mail-in voting will matter, right? Mail-in voting is sometimes easier, but I think people have to make sure that they know how to vote with mail-in ballots, right? A lot of states have different rules, and so you have to make sure that you're paying close attention. It's not just checking the boxes and then mailing your ballot back. In some states, it has to go in a protective sleeve. You have to make sure the signature is in the right place. In some states, you have to make sure that there's a witness seeing you sign in, and they have to sign off as well. And so I think you're going to see a lot of people turn in mail ballots, but I think people have to pay attention and make sure that they're turning in their ballot correctly. But I do think that will in part fuel some of this record turnout. Yeah, I think a couple things that people can do is, I think a little bit what you're doing, right? Educate people, let them know how important their vote is. And I think this can be done in interviews like this, in social media, where you just tell your friends, look, this is an important election. People don't pay attention to politicians often. People don't pay attention to professors. People don't pay attention to others, but they do pay attention to their friends, right? Like if your friend tells you how important it is to vote, and if you care a lot about voting, you should vote, and then you should go and tell your friends to vote. This direct contact, particularly from individuals that others respect, is a large motivator in increasing turnout. Yeah, I mean, it's generally a costless activity, right? Particularly in the state of Oregon. You just mail in your ballot. In some places, there are high costs to it, and it's really important that you vote, right? So if you're in Georgia and you're standing in line for 11 hours, that's a difficult thing to do. I don't know that I've ever stood in line for 11 hours for anything. So I think it's important, though, because your life, your well-being, the issues that you care about are on the ballot, right? These are things that are going to matter to you. The type of job you're going to get, how you're going to get paid at that job, what the economy is going to look like, what the climate is going to look like. All of these things are on the ballot. And so while you might think, it doesn't matter, and if I don't vote, everything's going to be the same, that's not necessarily the case, right? And elections are swung by a few voters, so it's important to get out there and vote, even if you feel like it's not that important. Those propositions are pretty important, right? So in this way, every state gives an opportunity for voters to be involved in the legislative process, right? So there's 4 propositions here in the state of Oregon that voters get to have their say on. Most of them around taxes, the legalization of certain types of substances, all of these things, and then campaign finance, right? So that's one of the issues that's being discussed. And so these are things that I think people care about, and it's kind of cool that we get to have some say in the policies that come that affect our state. And so beyond just the presidential and local elections, you're directly voting on policies which can have an impact on your life.